What would you think if I told you that every game master has a tool that they probably don't use but could save them a lot of headache further on in their campaign? It's called the Session Zero, and that's what we're talking about in this episode. Hey there, fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard QUIDER, and welcome to the show. Today we're talking about the Session Zero. It's a tool in the Game Master's arsenal that can help the campaign run more smoothly for the long term. And really, all it is a discussion. If you've been involved in role-playing games for any length of time, you've likely heard the term Session Zero. It's been described as a great, indispensable tool for Game Masters, but more often than not, it's just kind of ignored and the campaigns start without any Session Zero leading in. I'm here to help you make better campaigns by explaining what is this Session Zero and how you can run one for yourself. In simplest terms, the Session Zero is a discussion between the Game Master and the players to decide what they expect in the game moving forward. There are several topics that you can discuss in a Session Zero, and I'm actually going to leave a document in the description below so you can download and have it all written out for you to use as like an agenda when you run your own Session Zero. So what things need to be discussed in the Session Zero to make sure your campaign can run as smooth as possible? First, you're going to have to tackle the game system. More often than not, you already have this decided. You and your players have talked about what game system you want to play before you even get to this point, but it's important that everyone be on the same page of what game system they're using, whether it's Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition, 4th edition, 3.5 edition, 2nd edition, or Pathfinder, or Starfinder, or Dark Heresy, or any number of role-playing games that exist. Everyone needs to know what they're playing and be on the same page with it. As self-explanatory as that is, it's good to keep that in mind moving forward. Next, you need to talk about game content. What do the players and you expect to have in the game as a story and as gameplay elements? These include things like traps, or puzzles, or lots of heavy combat, or dungeon crawling, or spaceship fights. It really depends on what the players want to get out of the game and what you as the Game Master want to put into the game. Oftentimes, and I've seen this happen several times, where the Game Master has one idea of how the game is going to be played and the players have something totally different in mind, and so the players show up to the game and they're disappointed because they're not playing what they had hoped. And so it's important that you talk about this game content and figure out the right ratio and come to a compromise with your players so everyone knows what they're getting into up front. Some players might like more combat-heavy experiences, some players might like more role-playing, puzzling experiences, and the same goes to Game Masters, where some prefer heavy tactical combat and others prefer heavy roleplay. I personally like to get a middle ground where I get some roleplay and some combat. Following up to game content, you gotta talk about the game tone. Now, tone is the overall feel of the game, and this, you can describe it as a genre. Is it a comedy? Is this a drama? Is it a horror? Is it a suspense thriller? How are the players and you as the Game Master going to react and build this world, and what is the feel that you're going for? If you want to have a funny, whimsical experience, that's fine, that's what you can do, but everyone should be on the same page on this, and you need to discuss it with your players to find out what that is. Just like with game content, if a player comes to a game expecting one thing and is given something else, they're not going to be happy about it. So it's important to talk about this, and so the players and the Game Master are on the same page. Like everything in the Session Zero, it's all about opening communication and getting on the same page for everything moving forward. The next thing I'm going to talk about, if you're trying to make an all-inclusive game, doesn't really leave much room for compromise. When it comes to things like game content and game tone, you can often come to a compromise with your players and find a nice middle ground. This next topic doesn't really have that wiggle room because you don't want to alienate people just by playing a game, and that is boundaries. And when I say boundaries, I mean topics that are kind of off limits at the table. Most often, the boundaries people want to put into place are related to sexual abuse or heavy traumas that they may have experienced in their life or could possibly experience in life. It's important that you talk to your players and discuss what you can and cannot talk about at the table. This is also a time where you can figure out what kind of players you are going to be dealing with depending on their attitude approaching these sort of boundaries and taboo topics. If someone says, "no rape," and a player says, "but everything should be available on the table," you know that might not be a good fit for your game. And that's important to know early on so you don't run into these problems later. Kind of a side note to this boundaries topic, I want to mention that most every topic you discuss and you can figure out why and why not people feel certain ways. When it comes to game content and game tone, it should be an open discussion. When it comes to boundaries, you don't want to pry into someone else's life. If they offer the information freely, that's fine, but I think it's important if someone sets a boundary, then you just accept it and move on. Now, death is kind of a weird boundary where it's part of the game systems. Almost every roleplay game has death involved, and most people know that it's just a game and can get past it. But it's important also to keep in mind if anyone does mention death, that's another discussion you need to have because it becomes such a big part of the game system. The next topic up for discussion is your table etiquette. What do you expect the players to do in the session to make it run smoothly? Are they allowed to be on their phones? Can they have their laptops open cruising on Facebook? These are important questions that you need to determine and set these limits and these rules with the players ahead of time, so then if you're 2 months into that campaign and people start looking at your phones, you've already set a precedence of that is not okay at the table. An important side note on this is it becomes your responsibility also to keep their attention. As the game master, you want to keep the game moving and keep it fun, and players might just get bored. So keep that in mind as you set these rules to give your players a little leeway when things slow down in the game, but not so much that they become distracted and don't engage with the other players. Continuing in the administrative responsibilities of this discussion, you want to talk about scheduling. Now, this might not be the easiest topic to discuss before you've even played, because some people may not even like the game once you start playing, and that's okay, but it's important that you kind of set the idea out there that this game may require some time commitment from everybody involved. This doesn't mean you have to play every week or even every other week. Once a month is fine, once every 2 months is fine. It doesn't really matter how often you play as long as all the players know that there will be some multiple sessions and it's not just a one-time thing. Unless you decide to make it a one-time thing. If the players just want to play a one-shot or a couple one-shots to get the feel for the game, that's fine, and this is where you discuss how the game will run in that sense, in terms of time commitment. And this also helps you as the game master to plan it. You, as the game master, have the most commitment to this game. You have to have the most commitment. If you get tired after the first session and you don't want to do it again, you need to talk about that and step down from being a game master. But if you say, I want to run a campaign, you're in it for the story of the campaign, for the long haul, so to speak, and you should be ready for that right up front. Next on the agenda of the Session 0 is more fun role-playing style content that I like to include because it gets people into the game. And this is first off just creating the characters with the players. You've now set the game tone, you've decided on the content you want to discuss. You may have even talked about the world you're trying to build, and now is when the players can take all that information and put it into their characters, which is extremely useful for them as a party and extremely useful for you as a game master to keep an eye on what they do with their party, so you can use that to build the story around their characters. For the players, when you're sitting around the table with everyone else in your adventure party talking about the characters you want to build, most likely you will all come up with something different. And so you won't have a party of 4 rogues or 5 fighters. It will, unless that's what you want to do, of course, but more often than not, you're going to have a more balanced party with some spellcasters, some fighters, some tanks, and a nice balance that can make the game more fun for the party as they go through the combat and the dungeons that they may encounter in their story. It's also kind of fun when players get together and talk about their characters that they may find some connections in their past that they want to include, where one character might be a sibling or a close friend of another character, or one character could be the mentor of someone else, or even rivals from their days in school. A lot of different options can come into play, and the players can discuss these at this Session 0 as they're building their character. Also, it gives them a good chance that everyone learns the rules and learns how to build a character together, which is an indispensable skill for players and game masters alike. In this time, you as the game master want to be gathering all the information you can from your players about their characters. They're going to be talking about backstories and different playstyles they want to try, and you can note this down or just remember it and use it to tell the story better for them. So that way the game feels more tailored to the characters that are going to be on this adventure. It's really fun for the game masters and the players if they have secrets, things that only that one character knows, and they can choose to share it with the other players or not. These are kind of plot threads, little hooks that you can dangle in front of them to help them move the story along. Then the next and the last thing of your Session 0 that I really enjoy is to give the players a chance to play in the world a little bit. This doesn't mean they have to run a dungeon. They can run a dungeon if you have something ready for them, but they don't have to. You could take the time and just introduce them at a tavern or in the woods and have them meet their characters and kind of get into the role-playing mindset that way. You can have them just talk about their backstories and explain some history of their characters to their fellow players. Anything that can get them more involved and kind of thinking like their players will help move the campaign forward and help them enjoy the Session 0, so it doesn't quite feel like just a meeting. It makes it feel like an actual part of the campaign. If you do want to run your players through a dungeon, I will include a one-sheet dungeon in the description that you can download and use at your Session 0. It should take about an hour to play depending on how the players interact with the world presented to them. And for you as the game master, it won't take a whole lot of effort setting it up. Just download it, read through it once, and you should be ready to go. And that is the basics of the Session 0. Of course, there are other topics you can talk about with your players to get even more in depth of what is expected of you and them as players and game master, but this will give you a good start to your campaign moving forward. And again, look in the description below for a full handout sheet that you can download of the Session 0 agenda. If you found this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be making more and more Game Master content moving forward to try and help you become the best Game Master you can, regardless of what game system you want to play. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the little bell icon that is included so you get notified whenever I upload a video, and thank you for watching.